meeting the filmmakers. So we'll go from there. I'm here with Bud Force and John Langmore, the directors for COWBOYS, and as well as Felicitas Funke. Did I say that correct? I think I did. She's
correct.
Okay, great. Oh, that breakfast looks good. The creative producer, and then Jeffrey Brown, the producer on the film. How are you guys? Thank you so much for hopping on today.
Doing well. Thank you, Bennett.
All right, great. Pleasure's all mine. And I just want to say thank you to the filmmakers. Thank you to our patrons who have made it possible for us to stream these films into our viewers' homes and meet these filmmakers. Thank you to our sponsors, because we wouldn't be able to do this without them. Thank you to Ford. It's possible that we're able to make it through this funky time. So I'm here with the COWBOYS team, and it's a wonderful, beautiful Western documentary, something that I really love, and I think it's a big part of every American, whether they know it or not, the idea of the American West. And so the kind of evergreen question I'd like to start off with is, where did each of you fall into this story? How was it discovered? Where did your interest come from? And how did you guys team up to capture the life of a 21st century cowboy?
Sure thing. Well, this project started about 5 years ago, which is when I moved to Austin. And I run a commercial production company called Ultralight Films. We make mostly documentary shorts and commercials, but it had been kind of a career dream to make a feature-length documentary. And before becoming a filmmaker, I come from a background, I was raised on a farm. I grew up rodeoing for 4 years, riding bulls, and cowboying whenever I was a kid, day working on different ranches and working full-time on some cutting horse ranches. And so one of the concepts that had struck me to make a film about was a film about cowboys, because I personally hadn't seen a movie at that point in time that I deemed to be really that authentic. And so I moved to Austin. I took out an office, and next door to me was a photographer named John Langmore. Come to find out, he'd spent the past 4 years on a bunch of large ranches outside of Texas, shooting a photo book called Open Range that's out now. And we hit it off right away because of our common background. John also used to cowboy whenever he was a kid. And so I told him about my plans, and we partnered up, and we went out and started shooting cowboys and making this movie for the next 5 years. We made a teaser that we put out online, and Faley saw that teaser and reached out to us and said, "Hey, I'm a German-born filmmaker. I have a super appreciation for the cowboy, and how can we partner up the three of us?" So we all three became partners. And then during the course of that time, we hired Jeffrey Brown as our producer, and we got busy rocking and rolling. John?
Yeah.
Haley, why don't you go ahead and give your own tale of the coming to this?
Thank you. Well, I have been a feature writer most of my life, and have been covering the American West for about maybe 35 years. I worked extensively for Philip Morris, for Marlboro, when they were still financially very secure, and trips to the West were not a problem. So I covered rodeo and cowboy lifestyle. And then 20 years ago, I wrote a coffee table book, which became kind of an icon. It's called Gathering Remnants, a tribute to the working cowboy, and it has a foreword by Clint Eastwood. So both Bud and John knew about the book, which helped. And then I followed up with the documentary a couple of years later. So COWBOYS is my second documentary. And we became a team. And that's it pretty much. We are 1922 films, and I am particularly excited that we have some very strong female voices in the film, and also children, and some minorities, and our teamwork has been fantastic. And I'm really happy with the result. And I hope that this documentary becomes an absolute classic and also becomes an educational tool, because I'm always concerned about the disconnect. A lot of city kids really have no idea where their beef comes from. And I think it's also really, really important to educate people about the role of the rancher as a steward of the land.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one part of the film I really do like, because most Americans, they hear cow or cattle and they think, oh, well, it's a stinky, bad business, bad for the environment, bad for people, all that sort of thing. But what this film seems to do is turn it on its head and make it I love the line where that one cowboy, his name escapes me, says, cowboys are grass farmers or land farmers. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a wonderful way to look at it. And you mentioned something, Faley and John and Bud. So you guys have this rich past, this learned past with cowboys and cowboying. And one of the things I like the most, and also I love Westerns, probably as much as any other film programmer, but each cowboy we meet is a fascinating character unto his or herself. Even the kids, talking about his old timer knife, they could all be cut out of like a Sam Fuller or John Ford film. And so I'm wondering, are these folks that y'all have known, or what was the process of finding, meeting, and exploring all of these characters over the 5 years?
Well, it's kind of trifold. We all had a specific role to play in that regard. So in Texas, I have just having cowboyed in Texas and been around this culture for a couple decades. I knew a lot of people at the big ranches here, the 4-6s, which is a legendary ranch up in the Panhandle, Tongue River Ranch, another one up there, Morehouse Ranch, Tom Morehouse, who's in the film. He's a legendary old cow puncher. And then outside of Texas, I had zero contacts or experience, which was actually my intention in inviting John into the film, was to get us through these gates. One of the hardest parts about the film is actually getting access to the cowboys onto the ranchers. And because John had just spent 4 years on these ranches working on his book, and also cowboyed on several of these ranches whenever he was a kid, he was super instrumental in that regard. And then Faley also had some very dear friends that we interviewed in the film, Marcia and Rick Walt.
Yeah, Bennett. So my dad did a book on the cowboy in 1975. He was a photographer, and his book was kind of the first book that really sort of went real in depth on these big outfit cowboys. He went all over the West, and when I was 12, he got me a job on a big ranch in eastern Montana. And so I spent 12 summers cowboying on these same types of outfits. I would go out with a wagon the first half of the summer and then go back to that. It was wound up being a horse ranch in eastern Montana. And I'd work there the second half of the summer through my first year of law school. And the last time I cowboyed, I spent the first half of the summer out with a branding wagon in Montana. And then the second half of the summer working for a law firm in San Antonio. And, I made as much in the first week as a lawyer as I had the whole first half of the summer as a cowboy. And that was the last time I cowboyed. So I didn't cowboy for about 30 years, almost 30 years. It had been 27 years. And when I decided to go do this book on the cowboy, kind of picking up where my dad left off, I started out at the Spanish Ranch, which is featured in the film, and then I spent 4 years, going to 14 big outfits all across the West. So, and I'd go out for 10 days at a time, and several of them I went back to multiple times. And so I knew guys from my early days and also knew guys from my book. So when Bud brought the idea about the film, would I want to partner with him on the film? And because I'm deeply entrenched in that world. It's like my own world. And so I knew those guys on a lot of those ranches. And, we went back to the places where I had good friends in place. So it was very easy, you know, to pick up the phone, because access is the critical thing. You know, they just do not want outsiders on a ranch where you're working around livestock. And that's why there aren't, you know, all documentary films like this out there, because it's just such a closed off world, in part by necessity. So, you know, it was easy though to go back and just be around old friends, and you know, and I think they felt that we and I would tell their story authentically, and you know, that when, as with any documentary project, when they feel that, you know, that's when they really kind of open up to you, and I hope it comes through, that they feel we're trying to tell their story honestly.
Absolutely. No, I think the intimacy and access, like you said, you had really lent itself to a documentary that's different. And one of the things that I really hold on to that's different about this doc is its beauty. There's not one missed opportunity to capture the setting, the characters within that setting, their tools, the cows, the horses, and even the black and white photography. And it's kind of a two-part question. Is one, what was it a goal of yours to have this bucolic, beautiful film from the start? And what were some of the challenges? Because every time I've seen the film, I mean, those cameras are inches away from a hoof, or you know, running with the horses down a frosty plateau. I don't know. It seems dangerous. Could you guys speak to the cinematography and the style a little bit?
Absolutely, Bennett. So yes, it was an intention and a very clear vision moving into the film of exactly how we wanted to capture it with the visuals. We used a very small team throughout the entire production. At any given moment in time, we only had 3 people in the field from our crew. Myself and another cinematographer did the video, and of course ran all the audio and did the aerial drone work. And then John shot the beautiful still black and white images that are in the film. Whenever we would go out, we had all of our gear. Basically, each one of us had a single backpack. So I'd have a drone in my backpack, 2 or 3 small video cameras, HD, and some audio recording gear. And we would go out and shoot from sun up to sundown. I think we ended up with 176 hours of what we considered to be usable footage that we cut down into the film, which is just a little over 80 minutes. And coming from a strong agriculture background and having spent an extensive amount of time around livestock, that certainly helps you operate whenever you're filming. You can't just swing up a tripod in front of a remuda of horses. You just can't swing up a drone and fly it really fast over 1,000 head of cattle. You're going to either scatter the herd, you're going to get someone hurt, you're going to get yourself hurt. You have to be very cognizant of all of this. So I would work hand in hand with my other cinematographer, and we would try to capture this stuff in a real relevant and safe way, both trying to make the visuals reminiscent of a cinematic Western. Dances with Wolves, Lonesome Dove, those were all inspirations visually as we went into this, but not just cinematic and widespread vistas, but also really delve into the minutia of the story and the characters themselves. So when you watch the interviews, the subjects are placed directly in the middle of the frame, and we zoom in to where you can really read their soul through their eyes, or that was our intention anyways. And there's all these components that we tried to put together in a minimal fashion to make the visuals look the way we did.
And Bennett, I would just add to that, you know, the thing with documenting the cowboy is, you know, it's this fine balance between taking advantage of the beautiful landscapes where they're operating, but not relying on that and having it, you know, you see it in a lot of photography, and I would say even in a lot of cinematography and westerns, where there's an over-reliance on just the beauty of the landscapes at the expense of really telling the authentic story that this is a difficult way of life. You know, it's hard on the people that live in these remote locations. So we wanted to, you know, it's real important to strike that balance between an authentic portrayal of a tough, rural way of life versus showing the beauty where, you know, they have the luxury of, you know, riding across every single day.
Well, thank you. I think we have time for one more, and this is something I hope everyone can chime in on, and it's piggybacking off of the conversation we were just having about the cinematography, the authenticity of representing these cowboys, the black and white photographs. When I viewed the film, it felt timeless to me, even when they were talking about the old timers and the new kids on the block who come in and can ride better than any other cowboy. But one question, because so many Westerns are this, they are a eulogy, like you see a Western of the West dying, or you see a Western about the preservation of the West, or reinventing it. And so I'm wondering, from the directors, the producers, when you were creating this film and finishing the cut, what was it in your mind? Was it a historical piece, a eulogy, a celebration? What do you want the audience to see when they watch this or take away?
Well, for me, and I think for everyone involved, it's a snapshot of this culture at this point in time. And it's nothing more. It's just to be viewed and explored and to be learned from. You mentioned timeliness. We all say this is not a timely film. It's not a socio-political documentary. This is a timeless film in our minds. We hope that folks can watch this film in 50 years and get as much education and beauty and inspiration from it as they can today. And I think that's all I would probably say about that.
Bailey, how about it?
The educational part. My dream is to have our film as a tool in schools, universities, colleges. Montana is running a great program in Dillon, you know, where they educate young kids to actually become horse trainers, barn managers. There's a future in that business. I would like our film to be a tool that you use in the classroom, that is an educational tool, and that also prepares people, particularly women, for the harshness if they make that choice. If you fall in love with the cowboy, you are going to pay a price. I mean, you saw Jolene and the logistics of driving 4.5 hours to town and then realizing the bag of sugar exploded in the car. These are the simple things. So for me, I think timelessness, a classic, and also a hands-on educational tool that we would make accessible, actually, you know, globally, not just in the US. There's a tremendous interest for cowboys and that lifestyle all over the world, particularly in Europe.
Yeah, and I'll chime in here if I may. You know, the film, you know, especially early on, you know, I completely agree with the educational aspect, but early on, there were no lower thirds on this film, and the film's, you know, part of the rollout of the film has been in art museums and photography museums, and so there is that aspect. You know, as you've seen the film, there are, you know, nameplates and we identify people, but very much operates. And it's just the richness of the film. It operates as an art film, and so. That's kind of been one of the great things thus far, is that it's screened in a number of locations, from the poetry gathering that was mentioned earlier to film festivals such as your own, and art museums, and that will continue on. And we're hoping to have a robust educational rollout as well. We're figuring all that out right now.
Yeah, and Bennett, I would just add very quickly that, you know, everybody has some notion of what the working American cowboy is, very few of them are ever based on any exposure to the life of very few of those notions are based on any exposure to the life of a working cowboy. So in my mind, what I wanted to do was just, you know, as a team, all of us have the film convey a really authentic portrayal of who the working cowboy is in the 21st century, which, by the way, is not that different than the working cowboy, you know, from the 19th century, other than pickup trucks and barbed wire fences.
Right on. Well, I think all y'all really accomplished that. It's beautiful to look at. It's amazing to think about and experience the lives of these cowboys. If there's ever a cowboy pilot program or something, sign me up. I'll give it a shot. I haven't ridden it.
Like everybody, till your first day of riding out with them.
Yeah, it's been a while, but